on a global level, we are actually having a different type of problem that needs a solution as well. And this is actually published from last year funded by the Gates Foundation and the journal Lancet, talking about, from the Global Burden of Disease Study, 11 million deaths attributable to dietary risk factors, specifically the low intake of fruits and vegetables, nuts, legumes, and whole grains. And so we are looking at a problem that's right in front of us that actually, where the solutions may also appear in front of us as well. How do we actually reconcile this problem with innovation, and how do we find new solutions? What I'm going to share with you now is how biotechnology, life sciences, pharmaceutical development is giving us a new appreciation of how foods can be used for health and to fight disease. And the way that I'm going to introduce this to you is by describing the drug development progress that's been made over the last 30-some years. I run a nonprofit organization called the Angiogenesis Foundation. We have been involved with the successful development of 34 FDA-approved drugs and devices. Against this backdrop of the last 25 years, more than 800 new drugs approved. So the interesting thing to ask is, what knowledge, human knowledge, scientific knowledge have we gleaned over this period of time that allowed 800 drugs to be approved? Now, I want to share with you something you already know, which is that genomic medicine, or knowledge about the human genome, has led to gene therapy. But this has been a long course of about 30 years. Remarkably, in 13 years, we went from not knowing about the human genome to actually sequencing it. So what do you think we've actually learned in this span of time? We learned many things. Now, we don't understand everything yet, but we actually are able to get the information. Among things that we've learned is the human kinome, and these are the enzymes that our cells use to produce proteins. And we pretty much know everything in the body that actually represents the kinome. Think about it as an evolutionary tree of sorts of chemical reactions in the body. We've also deciphered inside cells many of the cell pathways from the outside of the cell, seen on the top, all the way down to the nucleus, which is sort of the command center. And each of these colored shapes represents a potentially druggable target, meaning that if you were in charge of a biotech company, you're trying to do a startup, and you had some university brain power behind you, you might actually choose one of these in order to be able to develop a new drug. And indeed, of those 800 drugs that have been developed, most of them actually target one or more combinations of these pathways. So, what's interesting is that these druggable targets that tell us something about how our body responds to drug treatments these pathways also respond to the foods that we also eat. And we know that foods can actually act on these pathways because of our knowledge of the biotechnology drug development system. And in fact, we've also been able to dive into foods to look for some of the chemical structures that our Mother Nature has laced into our food supply. And we call these bioactives, broadly speaking. This is just a partial list. Many of these chemicals actually give foods their color or their flavor. And most of them are designed to be health defenses for the plant from which they're derived. So they either allow reproductive defense so that they can they attract bees for pollination, or they actually may become natural insecticides to prevent insects from eating them over the course of a summer, for example. So again, plant defenses, when humans begin to eat the plant defenses, they suddenly start to interact with our own body's systems. And I just wanted to share with you one of the experiments that I've done comparing foods and drugs. This is actually in the top black line, an assay system that we use to study whether or not a drug or chemotherapy drug or another pharmaceutical might inhibit bad blood vessels that are growing in our body. These bad blood vessels could be feeding cancer, for example. So as you can imagine, the shorter the bar, the more powerful the effect on the cells to prevent cancers from growing. In this case, blood vessels, I'll show you in a second. So this is actually a gold standard assay developed for the pharmaceutical world that I was involved with. And when I was doing this experiment, I realized that you could FedEx overnight a chemical, a drug, and find what its effect is within a few days, but you could call a pizza in to the same lab in 15 minutes and you wouldn't be able to study it. So we then set up across breaking down the food system, and then when you actually begin breaking down the system and testing food components in the same system as drugs, you can see this is pharma versus farm, head to head in the same drug development assay, and remarkably many of the same elements that actually are in plants have similar or even better potencies than we see in drugs. And so again, if I were to disguise the names of the foods here and put a chemical name, a pharmaceutical name, you might be impressed at some of the activity, the potency of some of these agents. But it's really not just about the food that we're learning about. It's really, when it comes to food and health, it's really about how our body responds to the substances we put inside the body. Remember those pathways I showed you? That's where the secret is.
Let's talk a little bit about stem cells and the food that we eat. You know, quite honestly, I am still so confused about stem cells. I've read tons of articles about them, but at the end of the day, I'm still wrapping my head around how they work. How do they work? And why do we need to keep them in mind when we're eating?
Well, listen, stem cells are, they are really complicated, but I'm going to give you and your viewers a really simple way of thinking about them. We're all made from stem cells, okay? So when sperm meets egg in the womb, in the uterus, and starts to grow and form our little baby bodies, everything is made of a stem cell. And when every baby is born, you know, every baby that's born looks exactly the same, more or less, right? It's like a Hershey kiss being punched out, right? All these little babies in a nursery, you know, all made the same way as stem cells, because our stem cells that made those little bodies all knew exactly how to form the little baby heart, the little baby liver, the little baby lungs, the little baby cheeks, okay? And we're all made out of stem cells from the very beginning. Now, most of our cells, when we're forming, wind up becoming organs, but our body reserves the right to keep a few stem cells around in order to regenerate ourselves and restore, replenish ourselves when we need it. So where do those stem cells live? Mostly inside our bone marrow. So if you look at the chicken and you ever break a bone, it's got a little hollow middle and it's actually filled with stuff, okay? That stuff are cells that include a lot of stem cells. It's the beehive where most of our stem cells actually live as we grow up into being adults. As we get older, those stem cells, there are fewer stem cells. If you get diseases like diabetes, you got fewer of those stem cells. And that's why aging people and people who have diabetes, for example, wind up having a harder time healing, and their organs tend to be a little more vulnerable, fewer stem cells sticking around. These stem cells actually come out of the bone marrow like bees coming out of a hive, and they circulate in their bloodstream just to fix things. They're like our fixers, and they come out, you get some damage, you know what, we don't even know it, but the stem cell's fixing it from the inside out. Now, how do we know that we regenerate? Well, it's simple. When our hair falls out, it grows back, it's regenerating. You know, the skin sloughs off. You know, you think about dandruff, that's skin coming off, just replenishes itself. Stem cells are replenishing those. Our gut turns itself over every 24, 36 hours. And some amazing organs we're now realizing regenerate. Our lungs can regenerate. You snip off a piece of your lung, grows right back. Liver, okay? You know why people can actually drink so much alcohol? Is because it's continuously regenerating. And in fact, you can remove 2/3 of your liver. You can knock out 2/3 of your liver, or you can just cut it right out, okay? And 1/3 will grow the rest of it back, like a salamander regrowing its tail or its limb. It's really amazing. Now, we can't grow back our arm, obviously, but we can actually grow back other organs. And so that's the power of stem cells. Now, when you read about stem cells, oftentimes you hear in the media about, you know, some corner clinic taking stem cells and injecting it into your, you know, your knee or your joints or your tennis elbow to fix it. You know, I'm working in that area. I'm in biotech, not ready for prime time yet. It's really complicated. We don't have an FDA approved stem cell therapy in that sense of regeneration. But we do it for cancer treatments, like we can do stem cell transplants, which can be really important. And we, of course, we do blood transfusions all the time, which includes giving back stem cells. So that's basically the 101 on stem cells. But here's the part where food actually comes into it. It turns out that some foods, and I thought this was so cool, when I got into the research, some foods actually stimulate stem cells to come out of your bone marrow to help improve healing. Now, what are some of those foods? Well, nobody's going to protest when I tell you that one of the most powerful foods that stimulates regeneration and your stem cells is dark chocolate. Dark chocolate, cacao flavanols. Now, chocolate is a confection. It's made in a candy factory, a chocolate factory. But and it's got sugar and all kinds of other stuff. So again, depends on what you put in it, but dark chocolate is mostly cacao. Cacao comes out of an orange bean. Now, it's a seed pod. It's bright orange, and then later on it turns brown when it matures. And it's got all these little seeds in it. It's cacao nibs, okay? That's the real deal. And when you have dark chocolate, it's really, really rich with cacao. It's got fiber in it, which is good for our microbiome. It's got these polyphenols in it, and really good dark chocolate. You don't have to have it as a candy bar, chocolate bar. You can also even mix it into like hot chocolate, for example. You can make a cacao drink. And that's how the traditional Incas and Peruvians actually had their cacao. Like the ancient societies that understood the power of cacao had it as kind of like as a beverage, like the coffee, the chocolate ritual you hear about, right? So turns out studies have been done in people even in their 60s who have heart disease, and they need more regeneration. They need more stem cells.
Check this out. I've got a free guide on my favorite breakfast foods to eat for longevity. From what's in my mug to what I look for when I buy these staples at the grocery store. It's all right here. All you have to do is click on the link and enjoy.
So what do? You actually measure, take a blood out, measure their stem cells, then you give them dark chocolate in the form of hot chocolate, have them drink it twice a day, just 8 fluid ounces. That's not very much. It's a little bit more than this. Down the hatch, polyphenols in the body, and for 30 days, okay, then they measure their stem cells again on an individual basis, and guess what? The dark chocolate doubles the number of stem cells coming out of bone marrow into your circulation for regeneration. So now so cells are interesting, but it doesn't make a difference in terms of your body function. Turns out they actually measured blood flow using a test called flow-mediated dilation. And flow-mediated dilation is where you actually do a blood pressure cuff, and you blow up the blood pressure cuff, it squeezes the circulation so your arm feels a little numb. Now you use an ultrasound probe to take a look at your blood flow, and then you release the cuff. Turns out the people who had the dark chocolate had double the responsiveness, the healthy responsiveness of their blood flow as well. So improved blood flow, double the number of stem cells coming out of dark chocolate. Who doesn't think that's a good thing, right? So a number of foods can actually do that as well. And it's just really cool. This is a new area of research of foods that actually stimulate regeneration.
So cool. Dr. Lee, could you please talk about the link between our DNA and the food that we eat? I believe it is telomere time.
Okay, so our DNA protects itself. We talked about, DNA that can be inherited from our parents, why you have the color eyes you have or the color hair you have, for example. Those are beneficial things. Those are good things, good attributes. And also inheriting cancer genes is really dangerous, right? Like we don't want that. But it turns out that on a day-to-day level, our DNA is being subjected to all these harms. You go to the beach. We know ultraviolet light damages our DNA and causes skin cancer. So you don't want to burn, you don't want to go to a tanning salon, but you know what? What about when you're just walking in the sun? What about when you're stuck in traffic and it's, and it's like an hour traffic line and you're sitting there and it's a bright sunny day and sun is coming through your windshield. You get your windshield down, you get your arm out the window. How come we don't get skin cancer? And by the way, just on a typical day, our DNA in our body makes 10,000 mistakes that can turn into mutations when they're dividing every single day. So the question is, how come we don't become mutants like the X-Men? How come we don't develop cancers all the time? Turns out our DNA is hardwired to fix itself. So if you have some damage, it will just repair it. It's like, our handyman, our DNA is its own handyman to fix itself. And so foods can actually help that. So antioxidants, which, everybody thinks, oh, it's so great. Again, we've heard it so often about antioxidants, we've lost touch of what it actually means. Antioxidants are like heat-seeking missiles that take out incoming missiles that can damage our DNA. It takes out these oxidative free radicals. Why are free radicals bad? Because it damages our DNA. So we want to basically like fire the missile command to actually knock out all those incoming missiles. And that's what antioxidants do. So we know that foods that contain a lot of vitamin C, which is a great antioxidant, can actually neutralize incoming DNA damage, protect our DNA. And in fact, some really cool foods that can do this. What my favorite story I like to talk about is kiwi. So, that brown kind of fuzzy fruit that it's kind of rough on the outside. You slice it down the middle, you open it up, bright green, little black seeds, a starburst on the inside. Amazing. Not too sweet, but kind of juicy. You can cut it up for breakfast. You can cook with it. You bake with it. Amazing fruit, packed with vitamin C. Also other polyphenols that protect our DNA. Eating one kiwi actually can protect our DNA from damage by about 60%. Eating 3 kiwis will rebuild our DNA, fix the potholes by about 60% as well. So again, that's an example of something really simple that we can actually do that has antioxidant and DNA protecting benefits. Now, what about telomeres? The telomeres are the protective caps on the end of our DNA. It's in our chromosome, our genetic material, and it's like the plastic tips at the end of a shoelace. Now, that plastic cap helps us not only tie our shoelaces, but it protects it from damage, so that if you actually damage or lose that plastic cap, what happens? Your shoelace starts to unravel, and now, man, you got to rethread that shoelace. It's a real pain, and it starts to unravel, and your whole lace becomes frazzled. And that's when that actually happens to our DNA, we are in trouble. So that plastic tip, that cap of our DNA, is called the telomere. And as we age and as our cells age, that telomere cap burns down like a fuse, like a candle. I call it a life fuse. The shorter it gets, the sooner that cell is getting older and aging and becoming damaged. So we want to actually slow down that burn. And in fact, we want to increase the length of that. We want to keep it longer if we can, right? So reverse cellular aging. Not just a slogan. We've been able to study this using real science. And the science of the telomere, by the way, won a Nobel Prize. The researcher Elizabeth Blackburn in California won a Nobel Prize for her work studying the telomere. So there's a lot of foods that can actually influence our telomere. One of them is coffee. Turns out that drinking like black coffee not only slows down the burn of the telomere, so it protects the cap, it actually lengthens the cap. It reverses cellular aging. So that's kind of a crazy thing, right? Like you think about, coffee. I mean, everybody kind of just swigs down their morning Joe, doesn't really think much about it, but really coffee, which again is a traditional beverage, ritual ceremonies around coffee beans picked and roasted. We think about it like going to the drive-through to get it, but traditional societies really understood there was something special about these beans. And that's what science is doing. We're coming back to rediscover what the benefits are. And one of the things that coffee can do, it slows down the burn, it increases the life fuse called the telomere. Look, our gut is filled with healthy bacteria. I will tell you, when I went to medical school, the young doctors to be, were taught that bacteria is bad. And I would say that in society as we're growing up, our moms and dad told us bacteria is bad and we have antibiotics to kill the bad bacteria. Well, there are bad bacteria for sure, but I will tell you most of the bacteria in our body, in fact, is good bacteria. So it's just the opposite. Like it's mostly good guys, a few bad guys, as opposed to they're all bad guys. Now, these good guy bacteria, they live in our gut. In fact, we've got, if you compare the number of bacteria to human cells, it's almost 1-to-1. So, if you were to take a biopsy and count the number of cells in the biopsy and then multiply it for your whole body, how many human cells do you think you'd have? About 40 trillion human cells. That's a lot of cells, okay? If you were to actually count the bacteria and how many bacteria we have, we've got 39 trillion, so almost 1-to-1. Now, how much is 39 trillion? I can tell you, 39 trillion is more stars than you can see in the night sky. Okay, that is huge. And I can tell you that those bacteria mostly do good things for us. When we eat food, we're feeding our human selves, okay? And our digestive system absorbs a lot of those good phytonutrients and polyphenols, the things we've been talking about. And then everything that our human bodies don't digest goes down to our bacteria, and we feed our bacteria. It's like feeding your dog the leftovers kind of thing. All right. Now, the bacteria, the healthy bacteria, if you feed them good stuff, they're really happy. They flourish. And what do they do for us when they flourish? Well, they produce something called short chain fatty acids, SCAFAs. Don't need to worry about the special names for them, except that all these things they produce lower inflammation, help us streamline our metabolism, help our blood sugars be better, help us lose weight, impact our skin health, impact our hair growth. And our healthy bacteria, by the way, really cool, they send signals to our brain to release social hormones. So this is the gut-brain axis. In fact, our bacteria pretty much text messages our brain and tells our brain to release these hormones. So our gut bacteria is incredibly important. It's almost like an organ system all by itself. So gut is connected to lowering inflammation. Inflammation is important in psoriasis. We see it on the skin. And we do know that, by the way, I've done research on gut bacteria and on healing of your skin. If you make a cut on your skin, if your gut bacteria is healthy, it'll help you heal up much better. All right. So I'm not telling you all the good stuff that you can do for your gut bacteria. Now, what happens if you do something bad for your gut bacteria? If you feed your gut bacteria things it doesn't like, you're going to kill some of it. And by killing it, you're changing the neighborhood, the ecosystem. Think about the ecosystem like the Great Barrier Reef. You know, if you start killing, it's beautiful, the Great Barrier Reef. I had the privilege of actually swimming there once. If you actually start killing off the fish and the sea anemones and the coral, you bleach it, you change that entire ecosystem, becomes a very unhealthy ecosystem. Not only does it look bad, but it can't do what it's supposed to do for the planet. And that's the same thing that happens in our gut bacteria when we feed it bad things. So what are some bad things? Extra sugar, added sugar, you overload it. Your gut bacteria really doesn't like that. Artificial sweeteners, okay? Also not good. The synthetic ones, like stevia is okay. But artificial sweeteners mess up your gut bacteria. Doesn't really like it. Ultra processed foods. A lot of those chemicals that you can't pronounce on the side of a box of ultra processed food or a can, your gut, again, our bodies don't absorb them, but they go right down to the gut bacteria, and you screw up your gut bacteria. The payback is actually your inflammation goes up. Your metabolism goes haywire. You gain weight. You don't feel good mentally and socially, right? Because you've undone all those good things that bacteria do. So gut bacteria is really important. How do I simplify how do we treat our gut bacteria really well? Like, okay, everybody wants to know. So what do I do? Here's the simplest thing. Eat foods with dietary fiber. There's a lot of foods with dietary fiber because that fiber, we don't absorb in our own body. We just pass it down. And again, this is one of the things that I was taught in medical school. Tell your patients to eat a lot of fiber because that fiber is going to tickle the colon, and then you'll be more regular and you'll poop all the time, okay, as opposed to being constipated. Way more than that. That's like not even, I don't think that's even regarded as true anymore. What happens is that dietary fiber feeds our gut bacteria. Our gut bacteria thrive and they produce all these anti-inflammatory compounds. So what are some foods that are good for dietary fiber? Well, great news. Legumes, white beans, navy beans, black beans, edamames, soybeans, all great food. Leafy greens, lettuce, kale, broccoli, great sources of fiber. Fruits. Apples, got about 4.4 grams in an average apple pear, about 5 grams of dietary fiber in a average size pear. Tree nuts, great fiber. You're snacking, snack on tree nuts, almonds, macadamias, pecans, walnuts, great sources of healthy fats, plant-based omega-3 fatty acids, which is good for your psoriasis, and dietary fiber, which is good for your gut microbiome, which then takes down inflammation. So, again, the gut is connected to the rest of our body, including our skin, and the foods that we eat can have a big impact. Now, I just want to close by showing you something about the microbiome, our healthy gut bacteria in our immune system, because we've got 37 trillion bacteria in our body. just about as many bacteria as human cells. And these bacteria are actually incredibly important because they live in our intestines. And we know that 70% of our immune system actually resides in our intestines. In fact, if you were to actually slice the intestines through the middle, it'd be like cutting through a garden hose. You would actually see the bacteria is inside the hose, in the lining, and then the immune system is filled like a layer of jelly within the lining of the hose itself. And just like a college student that's living with roommates in a dorm that has very thin walls, the bacteria can pound on the intestines and signal and communicate with the immune cells like college roommates can through the cell walls. So this is the close interrelationship between our gut bacteria and our immune system. And in fact, this has been studied in the context of COVID. This was a study from China where they looked at healthy people and tried to find out what type of markers were present in their blood that would protect them against getting COVID-19. And it turned out that there was one marker called interferon gamma, which is one of our body's natural immune virus-fighting cytokines. So it's a good cytokine that helps fight virus. And then they actually took a look at which gut bacteria in people correlated with that good beneficial antivirus cytokine. And they found various bacteria that seemed to be correlate with our body's ability to produce that cytokine, which lowered the risk of getting COVID. Then they went back to take a look at which foods were eaten by these people that actually had the unique bacterial signature that correlated with that important virus-fighting cytokine. So you can kind of see the chain reaction between what we eat and our gut bacteria and our gut bacteria and our immune system with the ability to defend against the virus. This is really a daisy chain, a domino effect of how our food is connected to our health in a pretty profound way. So this is at early days of research because we're still learning a lot about this disease state. But what was amazing is they found a number of foods that were beneficial. And I just want to show you two of them that were found to actually be beneficial. So it turned out that green and black tea, but especially green tea, contains a natural chemical called EGCG. It's a catechin. You've probably heard of it if you're actually an aficionado of tea, one of the healthful polyphenols. But in that study, it was correlated with lactobacillus in the gut, a particular species that was then correlated with interferon gamma. This is the body's natural virus killer, so is our defense system. And intake of green tea correlated with that microbiome, which correlated with the virus killer. Another correlation was found with dietary fiber and polyunsaturated fatty acids, healthy fats, which are present in nuts. For example, pecans, which are one of my favorites, so easy to eat and roast and cook with. And the polyunsaturated fatty acids was correlated with another healthy gut bacteria called Ruminococcus. This Ruminococcus was then correlated with the body's ability to produce interferon gamma, the virus killer, again. So I've written about more than 200 foods in Eat to Beat Disease. And if you want to follow me and learn about more foods that I'm continuously analyzing and publishing and spreading the word on, you can come follow me on social media. But what I really wanted to be able to do is to talk about transformation, because the transformation is really recognizing that indeed food is our medicine, but it's not about salesmanship. It's not about snake oil. It's about the real bona fide science of understanding how foods contain substances that when placed in our body, help our body to respond, including through our immune system, in meaningful ways. So where are some of the future of food transformation? I'm going to give you a couple of ideas, or I think where we're going to go. I think that in the future, we're going to be talking about the functionality of foods. What can the food do alone and in combinations? How do they synergize and combine with each other so that 1 + 1 is equal to 3 or 5? We're going to be looking at dosing of foods. If food is medicine and medicines have doses, how much do we need to eat and how often? That is a simple question that still has a lot of research to be done, but what an amazing thing to know exactly how many apples a day you need to eat to keep a doctor away. Every individual is different, so personalized and very precise nutrition tailored to an individual at a particular time in their lives is incredibly important to get away from generalizations that are out there. Prescription diets. I foresee a future in which medical doctors, physicians will become much more educated in the kind of material I just shared with you. And they may, in fact, in the future be writing prescriptions. A few doctors are doing that in the United States already for their patients with diabetes and heart disease and other conditions to try to help them improve their overall lives. And they take literally the prescription to the grocery store as a shopping list. And in some cases in the United States, some insurance companies are actually paying for the foods or underwriting some of the foods that are actually purchased. Fresh foods we know are good. A real opportunity for innovation is to say, can we process the foods in a way that can be scaled? Fresh is difficult to scale, but is there a way of preserving the goodness? We know that dried is okay. We know that long storage of some foods like purple potatoes can actually enhance the polyphenols, but are there ways that we can actually develop food technologies to preserve the benefits of foods, whether it's drying, whether it's powderizing, a number of different ways. Right now, ultra processed foods are really regarded as villains, and perhaps for justifiable reasons, but that doesn't mean that the future has to be that way. We could actually work together, someone like me taking life science with food scientists, with food technologies, with innovators and business leaders, and put together a plan, a roadmap to be able to really create scalable food that actually contains the goodness of Mother Nature. And then finally, I shared with you an example of food plus medicine, not food versus medicine. I'm a doctor who believes profoundly in the importance of the right medicine for the right person at the right time. But food is the missing tool in the toolbox that might make our medicines better. They might also help us avoid the need for medicines, but if we did need medicine, what should we be eating? So I'll just close with this quote by an astronaut named Ronald Guerin, who said, "Awe and wonder are the secret ingredients to creating a better future." And I think that out of the pandemic, we are actually beginning to shine a new light on the secret ingredients of creating the future of food as medicine. There is a potato. Most people don't think there's that many nutrients in potatoes, but a purple potato was once considered Incan gold. Like it was because it came out of Latin America. Beautiful potato. You cut them in half. They're kind of dark and bluey and dusky colored on the outside. When you open them up and show them, man, they're like this beautiful dark. They look like blueberries. And then if you refrigerate them in cold, you actually change the dye. It suddenly turns bright purple. So you want to see an amazing explosion of color. Take a purple potato, cut it in half, and put it in a refrigerator, and it'll just light up for you. Turns out that dark purple comes from a natural dye called anthocyanin. By the way, same dye that's in a blueberry, as a matter of fact. But that purple potato has been shown, whether you bake them, whether you make them into chips, whether you eat them raw, no matter what you do to, or whether you mash them, they target cancer stem cells, which is amazing. So colon cancer stem cells is where they've been studies of little tiny baby stem cells that make cancers come back. That's the one kind of like the one nightmare for cancer patients is like once you got it treated, if it comes back, cancer stem cells do that. Now we're finding foods that can actually build up your good healthy system, your immune system, but at the same time, as a fringe benefit, it can actually kill cancer stem cells as well. So again, another way of just our looking at our body's health defenses. When I set out to write my book, Eat to Beat Disease, and long before I started to create the course around it, I thought about an analogy that I could tell people why plant-based foods are good.
Hey there, are you ready to use food to improve your health? I do cover a lot in my YouTube videos, but there's only so much time to dive deep into how to use food as medicine. That's why I created my Eat to Beat Disease course. In my course, I walk you through how to use everyday foods that you can find in your grocery store to boost your body's health defenses. This is all based on my research, and everything is rooted in science. And I've made it super easy to follow with practical everyday tips. Whether you're trying to prevent disease or just want to optimize your health for longevity, My Eat to Beat Disease course gives you all the tools to make it real and to help you get lasting changes that will help you live longer and live better. To learn more, click the link below or scan the QR code on the screen. I can't wait to get started together in my course. Now, back to the video.
Because they take care of our body in the way that you would if you were trying to make sure a medieval fortress was being taken care of. So, everyone's seen the picture of the Disney castle. And if you've gone to some of these beautiful castles, there's a few castles in the United States, a ton of them in Europe, but they're fortresses. They protected the people that lived inside them. And that's how our body's designed, our body fortress. And just like a fortress, there's lots of different ways that people who built these medieval castles designed the fort. There's the moat, there's the drawbridge, there's the little slits in the wall that people can fire arrows at the enemies. There's the sloping walls, so you couldn't climb up very easily, you slide back down the wall. And then there's even these like tricky things that most people don't know about in the castle. You go visit a castle, you buy the ticket to go visit the castle in Europe, right? Like, you don't realize when you're walking in the main gate, look up sometime, look straight above your head. In the ceiling will be a hole. And that hole was part of the defense. And people used to drop rocks or boiling oil at invaders coming in. That's how our body's designed. We've got tons of these defenses all over our body. Our immune system, our angiogenesis, our stem cells, our microbiome, our DNA's ability to protect itself. We are just a body fortress. We're made with human cells. We're also packed with bacteria, so we're the holobionts. That's our ecosystem. And how we make decisions of what we eat. Mostly plant-based foods. Go back to the traditional cultures. Those recipes, they were designed not only to taste good, but to actually be good for us. That's why I just think that this whole idea of plant-based nutrition, food and health is really about bringing us back to our roots, bringing us back to what we enjoy doing, which is eating, taking us and putting us more in touch with our bodies. And that's, what I think is really awesome about your program is really being able to help people understand this is who we are. Since we live in a world that's changed, to understand that this is another reason. Take care to avoid, just protect yourself, in the same way that you would for anything else. These are the things that we know how to do. And very importantly, eat to improve your immune system, because the stronger your immunity, the more likely you're going to resist everything. A cold, a flu, COVID, cancer, those are all good things to actually have good shields on. And eating the right way can decrease and lower inflammation in your body as well, which is the thing that you don't want to begin with. So I think there's, a lot of insight that research is giving us about how important diet and lifestyle actually are.
All right, so a fun, quick question. If you could only eat 5 foods for the rest of your life, what would they be? What are your top 5 anti-inflammatory, immune-supporting, health-supporting foods?
I'm going to give you 5 because people always ask me, Dr. Lee, what do you like to eat? And what I tell people, it's less about what I eat, but how I eat and the patterns of food. Because I actually really enjoy food. Like I don't like picking out, but I love the idea that food has culture and history, and I love the taste of food. So I love food. I wouldn't say I love eating. And because I'm a researcher, I happen to know in my book, I wrote about more than 200 foods that can boost your body's health defenses, including make your blood vessels healthier, your stem cells, your gut microbiome healthier, antioxidants, anti-inflammation, and boost your immunity as well. And these are things that I talk about in my free masterclass that I give every other month. But I will tell you that if I would be stuck on a desert island and I only had 5 foods that I packed, what would they probably be? Well, thinking about what I like and thinking about what I would eat and what's good for me, I would say green tea would be one of those things because I really enjoy green tea. By the way, footnote, matcha, which is the whole leaf of green tea powdered up, has been found by researchers to kill breast cancer stem cells. quite amazing. Those are the baby cells that help the cancer keep coming back. But it does so much other as well. It's anti-inflammatory, good for psoriasis, and lowers stress as well. So that's number one. Number two, dark chocolate. So most people don't realize this, but dark chocolate is made with cacao, a lot high cacao, 80% or more. The cacao part is a plant-based food. So although there's plenty of stuff you can put into a candy bar to make it less than healthy, the higher the cacao content, the healthier it is for you. Dark chocolate, anti-inflammatory, helps to calm the blood vessels. Also just generally emotionally calming as well. It actually improves depression. So that's the second one that I would actually eat. I happen to love, if I could be on a desert island, I'd want to have a food, I would love to have a juicy peach, a ripe summer peach, one of my favorites. And yeah, okay, it's pretty sweet, but I don't worry about the sugar because, a fruit has fructose, it does have natural sugars in it, but more importantly, it's got all these other things, the fiber, the skin of the fruit, it's got ursolic acid, all these other delicious things. So I consider a peach, a beautiful ripe peach, to be one of those treats that I love to eat. Fourth, blueberries. I love blueberries. Blueberries do a lot of things. The dark blue of blueberries actually is a natural dye called anthocyanin. Anthocyanins lower inflammation, good for psoriasis, and raise your immunity, which is good to protect you against all kinds of infections and cancer as well. And so I love blueberries. And by the way, the frozen blueberries have the same amount of the good stuff, those polyphenols, as fresh blueberries. So, if you want to get frozen blueberries and put them into your smoothie, that's just as good as picking them off the bush fresh. So, don't worry about what the source of, those are the weeds if you want to get into that. And then, probably the final thing that I really enjoy, I like snacking on nuts. I like tree nuts. I would say I like cashews I like to snack on, macadamias I like to snack on, but I really like all kinds of different types of nuts. It's a great way to take the edge off of your hunger between a meal. It's just to get a couple of handfuls or a handful of nuts and just to snack on those. Let me tell you how powerful nuts are. There was a study of almost 800 people with colon cancer, stage 3 colon cancer. That's colon cancer that's spreading your body. Okay, it's really serious. And they were getting treated by their oncologist. And the research study found that those people with stage 3 colon cancer who ate 2 fistfuls of nuts a week, 7 days, okay, had a 57% reduction in mortality. So it's not a swap for cancer treatment, but just eating those nuts, feeding your microbiome, getting those healthy plant-based omega-3s, lowered inflammation, jacked up your immune system, controls blood vessels, feeding tumors. I mean, you can't argue against the power of something like that. Plus, I love the taste of all those foods. So those would be my 5.
Not food as medicine, it's food and medicine. All about activating our body's health defenses. The future. This is going to take us into really distant locations that we can't even predict yet. The flavorome is actually looking at what are the substances that Mother Nature has imbued into foods and how they relate biologically. And so when we think about all these amazing things that I showed you earlier that people might be enthusiastic about, because it really is today's innovations, I hope I've shown you a little bit about what is possible in the future by really taking the best of what we've done already in biopharmaceuticals and applying that same kind of thinking. And I'll just close with this quote by Andre Gide, who won the Nobel Prize. He said, "Man can't discover new oceans unless he's got courage to lose sight of the shore." And I think that's where we are with food and medicine. This is about losing sight of the shore that we always talked about. Just go vegan, eat sustainably. Yeah, we need to do all those things, but look at how much further we have to go. Anybody who wants to learn more about the details of what I've shown you and get the lists of the foods that can activate angiogenesis, stem cells, microbiome, DNA protection, and immunity, I wrote this book, Eat to Beat Disease. Feel free to connect with me, and I hope this is something that will impact the decisions you make this evening. Thank you.
Thank you for that tour de force. 2 quick questions. I don't think I ever had broccoli till I was 20, as my mom is here. Thanks, Mom. I never really ate what's good with my veggies. All those sort of green powders that you combine some of these things, concentrated broccoli, can that help me? Question number 1. As opposed to the natural way. We all want to cheat, don't we?
Well, look, I mean, I think that it's completely legitimate to try to take versions of whole foods and try to create simplified ways to actually get as much goodness as you can. But really, as what we've heard at Exponential Medicine, is that we are just scratching the surface of being able to monitor how well we're doing. If we can have an objective measure that can show that the green stuff will do just as well as a serving of steamed broccoli, then we'll actually be able to compare those things.
Right.
In the meantime, I would encourage you to eat the whole food.
Eat your greens. Last question real quick. When you and I went to medical school, barely any nutrition. How do we encourage clinicians beyond nutritionists to start prescribing food for both prevention and therapy?
Right, well look, medically indicated meals is actually already starting, and I showed you the insurance companies, our payers, and self-insured employers are now beginning to actually reward people for making better choices. Doctors are really at the back of the bus on this, and I think one of the things that we all need to do is to encourage the young people coming through the ranks, and also the administrators who are actually looking at curriculum, and the board test designers, to be able to put more information about nutrition, so we're not only thinking about medicines, we're actually thinking about food. Hi there, if you enjoyed watching this video, I know you'll love the next one. Stay here and check it out, and I'll see you there.